Hello and welcome to the CX Files for May 14th, 2026. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal, and Mark, May 14th, it's incredible to think that we are nearly halfway through the year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was thinking about this because June is an important month in Brazil. We have lots of pretty much endless winter street parties. So it's a lot of fun. You can go out pretty much any evening of the week and someone's having a street party. And I think it's just because it's like pretty much the coldest time of the year in Brazil, June, July,
Hmm.
which is obviously the complete opposite of anybody in the northern hemisphere. But yeah, it's a fun time because I often say to people that winter in Brazil is a bit like summer in Scotland.
Yeah, I would say as somebody who's been in Brazil during winter time, very pleasant. You don't need a big heavy down-filled coat. You don't need gloves or earmuffs. You might need a lighter jacket, but it's exceptionally pleasant to go out and walk around and just enjoy yourself. So as you move into winter, I would just say, just think about all of us who in the spring, say in Canada, where I am, are still wearing our winter coats.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this week we are talking to someone who's in a very hot place, Phoenix, Arizona. It gets extremely warm there. I've actually done some
Oh
road
yeah.
trips around Arizona, so I know how hot it gets there. Stephanie Reeves Millner, who's at TP, she's a global EVP at TP. She wanted me to stress that she's speaking here in a personal capacity, though, but clearly, that's just because I think she's talking about some of her personal videos that she posts and stuff like that. It's not really kind of official marketing policy. So, Stephanie talked to me about two subjects really. Service to sales was the main focus of the conversation. This idea that customer interactions have always been seen as a cost to the business. And now there's a lot of people actually kind of figuring out how do we generate revenue from all these interactions. And then we also went on and talked about her videos because we picked up on the recent episode with Nathan Muniz.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he was talking about how he does a lot of videos in the contact center. And Stephanie does the same. It's nothing official, it's not guided by any kind of official marketing policy, but she just posts loads of videos on LinkedIn talking about the business. And she gets lots of feedback. She really gets a lot of traction from that. And I think that, this kind of under the radar kind of marketing is something that's becoming really important in BPO.
Yeah, 100%. Finding a way to stand out, and videos are a great way of doing it. I've been doing videos with clients of mine now for a number of years, and I can tell you that the take up has been fantastic. The broad market, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's YouTube, whether it's going visiting a company website, the broad market likes video content. They like the ability to digest it. They like the conciseness of it. So I'm really excited to hear what Stephanie has to say on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course the main focus that we talked about was the service to sales angle. And I think that we talked about a year ago to VXI, Michael Aronovitz, on this subject. But Stephanie certainly talked about the different angles, and I think it's quite interesting. You can actually look at, can you get a revenue uplift, or can you preserve a customer relationship that you were about to lose, or can you encourage greater customer loyalty? There's a lot of sort of outcomes that you can focus on that actually end up generating revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to recommend that we hop on over to hear a little bit about what Stephanie was discussing with you, and we can enlighten ourselves a little bit more about sales to service as well as video.
Okay, Stephanie, it's great to get you on the podcast. Now, we've been talking a lot on LinkedIn in the past, and I featured you in a book that I wrote in 2024 that talked
Yes,
about
thank you for that.
people using video and stuff. And
Mhm.
I think I'm going to ask you about that a bit later. But I wanted to start off with this this subject of service to sales, and really defining the value of the customer interactions, because traditionally this has always been seen as a cost to the client. It's a cost of doing business. It just has to be there. So what's your argument when you're talking to someone about the value that you get from the customer interactions then?
I think that's a great question, Mark. I am obviously an advocate, as you well know, for that, human engagement, if you will. From a standpoint of like customer care as a cost, I think when we think about that, we put it in an expense line instead of looking at it from a cost per contact. We're looking at it from cost per contact, average handle time, staffing. But the customer doesn't think about it from an expense standpoint, right? They're not thinking those terms. What they're thinking about is, how is this brand showing up for me when it matters most? And so as we look at that, we can look at it from just like an overarching value stream, right? So you've got your revenue protection, which is like saving the cancellation, preventing a return, resolving friction before they go out the back door. And then you're looking at it from like a revenue creation, identifying a legitimate need, like what can we do to upgrade or actually improve the experience for the customer. Then you've got, the trust and loyalty factor. So especially in like high emotion situations, which we're seeing more and more, that once the human get engaged, it is a much more complex human emotion interaction because it's been solved already in advance. The simple things have already been solved in advance. And then you've got your insight and product feedback. So from a cost center, I think we need to kind of shift it from minimizing the value and look at like it more of like let's call it a brand performance engine, where you're looking at retention, repeat purchase, conversion, and overall lifetime value, so that every interaction just becomes more of like this moment of truth where you're saying, okay, what's the health of our relationship with you? And how have I either created value or destroyed that value? And that's kind of my passion. I'm obviously very passionate about this conversation.
Yeah, and it seems that because you're talking about like identifying specific opportunities, either to protect revenue or generate revenue,
Right.
Is that something where AI can actually help out, maybe to point out opportunities or guide the agents and say, hey, we're at danger of losing this customer. Why don't you talk to them about a special offer, or whatever kind of guidance it can offer?
I think that's a great question. And it's one that we're discussing across the industry, right? Across all verticals. And there are multiple tools that are phenomenal that really help the front line to interact with the consumer from a lens of, what uniquely could you offer them and what's their past purchase power. One of the things that we're seeing right now is obviously the disparate systems talking to one another. So there's a need, back to my conversation, as I just stated, in regards to it being a place for gaining data rich, moments. It would be in terms of like making the resolution from an augmentation standpoint, but not replacing the human, because there are going to be situations where the human is going to be critical at that highly emotional place where perhaps there's a health situation, there's a time sensitive sense of urgency. I don't want to shout at the AI system. I want to talk to a human that acknowledges me. And even if the AI has an emotional component to it, my confidence is still going to be in that direct dialogue. So the understanding, the guidance, the opportunity spotting can be augmented by AI, but I think that the personal dialogue is still a critical component, so that the AI makes the suggestion and the human makes the decision.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess the human agent should even then have the autonomy to decide whether it's a good suggestion. Yeah.
That's a really great point, right? Because there's going to be SOPs that are in place that make the decision for the human. But as the complexity moves about, I think that it's going to be important to have the human be able to make multiple offers so that actually the consumer can make the decision, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of that as well, right? Like, here's what you're eligible for, here's what your options are, and then that consumer makes the decision about what is best for them inside of this unique situation, or the timing in which they need something, or the reason, the ultimate reason why they were reaching out in the first place.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because I had this conversation like we did a podcast on a similar theme about a year ago with Michael Aronovitz from VXI, and he was talking about the example of, if you're talking to an agent about your hotel booking, then the agent can pitch a sea view, $50 extra, we can give you a great view, this kind of thing. So it's part of that intuition and giving the agents a lot of autonomy around upselling and cross-selling. Um, is that part of and I guess that's revenue generation rather than protection, because you're already talking to a customer that seems to be happy, and potentially you can pitch something else to them. But I guess, the question is, how much is that down to the agent autonomy and how much is down to maybe some intuitive AI identifying offers that might be relevant?
That's a really great question. I recently was trying to make a decision about traveling with my family and had a conversation with a frontline agent. I had been looking up using the AI solution for this particular hotel system. And they made me recommendations based on what I was looking for. And then I spoke with the human, and we had some conversations about the particulars of the location that really weren't available to me inside of that AI, right? So they kind of gave me more of a guided experience, for a human experience. And from that lens, right, you can create loyalty for me by having that dialogue with me, not feeling like I'm being pushed off to somewhere where I'm just being deflected, but you're actually engaging with me. And then that loyalty to me as a human and human interaction creates a multiplier in like my spend, because I want to engage with you. I know I can get to a human if I need to, right?
Yeah.
If I decide that all of the things I've been doing for my self-serve is actually not serving me, I have the opportunity to speak to that human, and that creates, I don't know, like credit in my own mind, right?
Yeah. Well, and I guess then, because you just talked about both revenue uplift, but loyalty as well. Are these distinct and separate strategies, or can you actually create a 1+1 = 3 effect if you actually combine these strategies?
I love that question. I think you can combine them, because really the ultimate goal is the resolution, right? And what's your resolution quality? And then how confident do I feel in that resolution as the decider, the consumer of that brand? And then what was the value creation for me, so that it's a more authentic engagement. And because of that, then I am willing to invest with you as a brand. And you're seeing more and more of that, right? And I think there's all these conversations about, quiet quitting at work, but there's a lot of quiet quitting of brands, right? I had a particular flower organization that I went to for all of my holidays, right? And I had a situation where I selected them to send flowers, and it was a lot of different flowers to create this beautiful environment for a friend of mine who was a bride, and it was for the bridal suite. And they did not deliver the flowers on the day of the wedding, and I didn't learn that until later in the day. And when I tried to resolve the situation, they offered to provide the flowers the next day and then give me a coupon for me to engage with them again. Yeah. Which, of course, that coupon was never used again, and nor was that brand, right? Because back to your point about like revenue lift and whatever, like they had upsold me on some of the additional flowers that I provided inside of that suite, but because they didn't deliver on the product, and because the experience was not consistent with the timeline I needed to, I didn't escalate, I didn't send a fuss message, I didn't post it on social media. I just simply stopped using them, right? And of course, now sharing it with you, and I have absolutely shared that story with others when they're asking me who they should use. I do not recommend that brand, and I recommend they stay away from that, because I wasn't when I started talking with my friends about it, they had similar experiences, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that kind of quiet quitting is something that's much more common than we realize, because we pay attention to the people on LinkedIn calling out brands for terrible service, and yet for every person that's kicking up a stink on LinkedIn, there'll be 100 people that are just not buying from a company anymore.
Exactly. I think sometimes the loudest ones are the ones that are truly your best friend, because they at least let you know what's wrong in either your process, your product, your what's going on inside your organization. Those who don't speak up but then step out, I think those are the ones we really need to be much more cognizant of, which is where that integration of human and then the data engine really should intersect at a much bigger level, so you can see really what's guiding the relationship that you have with that consumer inside of your brand.
Yeah, yeah. And then if we are equipping agents with technology and training that's helping them to identify revenue opportunities, then I mean, is this changing the way that they're compensated? Because aren't they effectively becoming sales team members rather than just service agents?
That's fair, right? Because in the past, like we're looking at metrics like their handle time or how many hours that they've worked, and now we're looking at more like a shared outcome. So I think that we are moving and we are progressing towards dialogue where we need to really look at how are we compensating, but we need to make sure that we're compensating from a lens of what behavior do we want to drive. Because sometimes we get so caught up in the metric itself, we're not cognizant of what that metric does in terms of what behavior it drives. So you want a quality output in that relationship with the consumer. Of course, you want to create loyalty. The goal would be for me to offer you things that would complement, what you need. At the same time, I want to do it in a way that the person who is handling it, that agent, can do it with some integrity, right? So that they get compensated for quality experiences as well as those upsell, and that those can intersect in a way that's really reflective of the brand voice that you want in the marketplace.
Yeah. I guess it's the classic kind of sales bonus problem that if you reward the agent for selling product X, then they will mention that on every single call, whether it's relevant or not.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, does it change how you design the contract though, as well? Because we just said about it,
Yes.
it may start changing compensation, but if you become focused on outcomes, so I mean, let me phrase it another way then. If we're looking at a customer service contract, typically we would have looked previously at maybe the FTEs. We would have said we need 300 FTEs to serve this volume of interactions. But then if we start looking at revenue uplift and other kinds of outcomes, then does it change the way that you do the contract with the client?
Absolutely. In that, what is important there is to make sure that you're dealing both with the business stakeholder as well as procurement in that environment, right? Because when you're dealing directly with the stakeholder, you can have that conversation because they understand what they're trying to drive. If you're only trying to measure the immediate cost savings, it's a very difficult place to be, because the two there, exactly what we just talked about, Mark, is that the two are being driven by different metrics. So the behavior is going to be different. So because the output in which it's deemed a success for them is not going to be aligned. And so definitely we're talking more about, for example, the difference between your steady state and your peak, right? So, your steady state, you're going to have a level of expectation that's going to be maybe different from peak, because peak might be handling a different level of conversation. They may not be having the more complex dialogue. They may be taking some of the calls that are not contained, that are simple inside of your AI or your system. And so that said, I think that there is a lot of room in which we've been in dialogue around how should the contract be constructed in consideration of the goals, and to your point, and how we want to compensate the agent and how they're showing up inside of representing the brand, and how is the consumer responding to them. So it can't be just one; it needs to be multiple factors, right? So you kind of give a percentage association with the value that you place on what, like each organization is going to make a different decision, right, on where their value focus is going to be and where it actually generates revenue. Sometimes an upsell is not what's generating revenue. What generates revenue is I keep selling that base product to that consumer, and they're purchasing over and over again, right? If I'm, for example, if I'm trying to book you to your point, like I'm trying to book you with the ocean view, And you don't want the ocean view, you want the cabin view because that's less expensive, but I can book you 3 more times on the cabin view. That's a much more, your overall lifetime value of that consumer and their purchase power is stronger. So making sure that we're not just incentivizing the wrong things, but allowing for, to your point earlier, that flexibility in the front line's decision-making power and empowering them to make the best interest decision for the business and for the consumer, where those two have an intersection.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that is it's that you want to just create a situation where you have a regular customer that keeps coming back and keeps spending. So you're looking at that total lifetime value rather than trying to upsell $100 or something, and that means the customer's never going to come back again. Yeah, which it's kind of like when you go in a grocery store and they have a £2 bar of chocolate that they're giving you as you're paying for your groceries and saying, do you want this as well? And then when you say, I don't want a bar of chocolate, they give you something else and say, do you want this? And it's like, that they've been told to try and push that particular product at the checkout.
Yes. And I think that goes back to what we were just saying, right? Is that the best revenue uplift isn't a sell, it's a help, right? That's the idea behind it, because then you do infuse that loyalty factor and you do create that value so that there is confidence and trust. And confidence and trust is really where, and we've been seeing this for years, right? That's where the brand has to be managed inside of that conversation.
Yeah,
we all need revenue, don't get me wrong, but
no, absolutely.
Deliver revenue, you have to have that brand trust.
I mean, this is how I run my own business. I'd much rather have clients that are regular, recurring, and that I can trust and work with, rather than I just try to gouge somebody and get 1 month of business from them. So it's exactly the same strategy.
Yes. And I think fiscal responsibility and human care, they absolutely can coexist, right? Efficiency doesn't mean or that you don't consider all the factors. It just means it's well designed so that you are helpful, like I said, in that more authentic brand voice. And then there's integrity inside of that conversation so that the value is genuine to the person, because like you said, like you don't want the chocolate, but 100% of the time, Mark, I will say yes to the chocolate.
Yeah. Well, they can spot you coming in the shop then, definitely.
Yes, right.
All right. Just before we wrap up, then I wanted to ask you something about the videos that we mentioned at the beginning, because we had Nathan Muniz on a few weeks ago talking about videos that he posts from his contact center in the Philippines, and he was saying that he said he doesn't have some grand marketing strategy, but he just posts videos of, especially with him, it's talking to agents, and saying, how did you deal with that difficult problem I heard you dealing with earlier today? And what he's found is that tools like ChatGPT and Claude are finding these videos and then saying to people asking questions about contact centers, here's a guy who's got loads of information about contact centers, go and talk to him. So he's getting recommendations from the AI engines because of that. But it's something I've seen you doing for a few years. I mean, probably even before the pandemic, I guess. You have a long history posting stuff on LinkedIn, but it's this classic thing of just talking about something that you've seen or talked to somebody about or experienced, rather than the typical corporate glossy video with lights and a script and everything. This is literally just like talking to the phone. I mean, how do you decide what you're going to talk about?
Great question. First, the reason that I don't do the beautiful background and whatever is just because I want, when someone listens or reads my closed caption, whichever benefits them the best, that they understand that I'm coming from this very genuine place where I've been thinking about something and I just want to share. And it's not this preconceived to what we talked about earlier. I'm not trying to present something that I don't think would be beneficial. I think it's genuinely something that has been on my spirit that I'm learning a lesson around, or I have been reflecting on. And if I could take sometimes a lifetime of learning, months of learning, moments of learning that were either painful to me or incredible aha moments, and condense that into 2 to 3 minutes, and someone else can benefit, and I can help support their growth in the way that others have mentored and supported my growth, then that is how I decide on what I'm going to talk about. As you know, I focus on community leadership and customer experience. And so inside of that conversation, my thought is, if I can touch just one person with the information that has been of benefit to me, then I have served others, right? And that I'm a faithful person, so I feel like I've been very grateful to God that I have had the mentors and the opportunity to learn the way that I have from different incredible humans. And so if I can pay that forward, I 100% want to be able to do that.
Well, I mean, and it's a great spirit. I think also it's great that previously you would have to hope that the right person saw that video, but now you can find that if somebody is asking AI a question and they touch on that specific subject, then it's highly likely to pop up as a recommended watch.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, that's so true now. And it is funny how it's evolved, right? Because to your point, when I first posted it was, I don't know if anybody's going to watch or listen or care, but I've learned this, and if anybody can someday benefit, then that would be fantastic. And what's been fascinating is that when I do post them, Mark, and I know you've had some of the similar experiences, is that I don't always get the recognition from a standpoint of, like, they don't always post inside of the LinkedIn or wherever it gets uploaded, but I will get DMs on the side that say, that was a message I needed to hear, or you had me think about something differently. And that's really what, for me, it's all about, because I want to create value and the things I've learned about for others.
All right, Stephanie, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.